Rudolf Lane's case is interesting. He was completely blocked, and frankly, I was about to discard him as useless. However, once Wake arrived and started writing, something changed in Rudolf. He's producing extraordinary work, increasingly dark pieces. Unfortunately, he doesn't respond to direction at all, and it's my belief that he's not so much a creator as an illustrator, perhaps, a recorder of sorts. I hadn't considered the existence of such a role before, let alone its implications, but the paintings he has produced are informative.
All artists place a part of their soul within their work, dedicating themselves to their craft in varying degrees. Their relationship with their work can express itself on a spectrum of emotions: love, depression, frustration. All of these are things the individual can be feeling during the act of creation. One of the research projects being performed in the Lakehouse was determining the amount of emotion placed within a work of art. We will focus on the ramifications of this idea in a future video. But for now, let's zoom in on one particular character and explore this concept, following this character's story and try to figure out the evolution of emotions he placed into his work. Rudolf Lane has been a background character as far back as the first Alan Wake game. Originally, he was admitted to the Cauldron Lake Lodge due to that creative spark fizzling out. His ability to paint had become blocked. No information was given as to what caused this, unlike other patients such as Alan, Emerson, and the Old Gods. Dr. Hartman's goal was not to do anything to assist his patients, though. Once upon a time, he was the writing assistant to a Thomas Zane, the poet, not one of the other variations we see popping up. So, he manipulated and guided the art of others to create what he wanted. Sound familiar, right? Even back in 2010, he was forced to be an unwilling subject for a monster. Lane, however, did not produce much for a long time. Not until Alan Wake appeared in town. At that time, he was struck with a sudden inspiration, his work coming out like a faucet. When Alan wrote Departure, he needed an illustrator, visuals to accompany the writing. Lane was the artist. The lake sent these images into his head one after another. The man was conscious enough of this work that he knew, at least on some level, where they were coming from.
Oh, hello. I've painted you.
Okay.
I was just struck by inspiration a couple of days ago. Dr. Hartman wanted me to paint landscapes, and that's what I was doing. But now I've been doing these things, a lot of them. The images just keep coming. Dr. Hartman likes them. He has them in his office.
Yeah?
He's very proud of me. He says I'm getting much better. I think I'm getting better.
Up until this point, Mr. Lane believes he is just a patient receiving treatment. His sense of relief over being able to paint again is apparent. But later that night is when everything goes wrong. The Dark Presence descends on the lodge. Hartman is attacked. The Old Gods help the other patients to escape, but Rudolf is unable to leave. We see these events in the psycho-thriller comic book. Nurse Sinclair and Dr. Hartman find Lane in the dining hall, tears flowing from his eyes. Even when the others try to get him to safety, something stopped him. His art. Departure was not complete. His inspiration never stopped coming. A paranatural compulsion kept him trapped here, unable to run for safety until all of the paintings were complete. A prisoner to his art. At this time, Hartman was on the run from a taken Ben Mott. One of the completed paintings Lane has upon the wall depicts its creator on his back, possibly stabbed by the Taken. Knowing what this predicted, the doctor used this to his advantage. Rather than help him, Hartman further manipulated Lane in order to make this prophecy come true. He gave the anguished painter his own cardigan, claiming that it was cold and he needed the warmth. In reality, a Taken Mott was following the monstrous doctor, targeting the man, obsessed to end his life or gain his approval, in no particular order. By dressing Rudolf Lane in his own clothes, it would confuse the Taken, buying the paracriminal time to avoid the danger himself. From a window, Mott smashed through, forced Lane to the ground, and the knife found a home inside of him. Only then did the Taken realize he got the wrong man. Luckily, the wound did not kill him. He was taken to a hospital in Seattle and recovered for 2 months. During that time, the FBC questioned him and classified Lane as a Class II para-utilitarian. It could only be presumed during this period he was made fully aware of Dr. Hartman's character and actions, his crimes against not only him, but the others as well. One could only imagine the emotions that were swarming through him during this time, realizing that he had been played for a fool, that the man he had trusted to make him better used him, that Hartman attempted to have him murdered in order to save himself. While laying in that hospital bed, he likely did a lot of soul-searching. Despite this trauma, a lot of inspiration may have come from it. Upon release, he moved to Watery and continued his work, the block that he had before now gone. The reason for him going to Watery may seem odd. Why return to the general area where one suffered so much trauma? One clue on Saga's investigation board may give us an answer. Prior to the FBI's involvement following Nightingale's murder, there were 3 prior victims. One of them was a dentist who worked in Bright Falls but lived in Watery. His name was Ted Lane. While Rudolph was born in 1955, Ted was born in 1967. I can only presume they were relatives of some kind. During the 2010 Bright Falls AWE, Ted Lane went missing and later turned up in a shallow grave, body bloated, a victim of the dark presence and the purification ritual performed by the Cult of the Tree. At the point in time when Rudolph was released from the hospital, Ted would have only been a missing person. It was only 2 years later that his body was uncovered by a dog walker, 2012. Coincidentally, the year that American Nightmare occurred in. This can be considered the first preliminary draft of Return. Maybe the second draft set up Ted Lane's body being uncovered, but it is hard to say. All the community has seen is the first draft, the penultimate draft, and the final draft. The important thing to take into account with this story is that a possible family member lived in Watery. And if there's one, there may be more. With that said, the reason why Rudolph went to Watery after being released from the hospital is simple. He went to be with family, even though one of them was missing. How and why the family settled here is a mystery. We know Rudolph had an accent, meaning he immigrated here later in life. Did the other Lanes come as well, or were they already living in Washington? There is not enough information to say one way or another. From here, the painter had a decade of peace, remaining in the town and keeping to himself, painting as inspiration struck and resting when it had not. During this time, the Lakehouse station was created in 2015. After hitting a dead end, the Marmonts went through Hartman's old case files. They came across Lane's name as one of his patients and a Class II para-utilitarian. In March of 2018, they made an official request to have some of them brought to the Lakehouse. These requests were denied by Dr. Darling. However, after the oldest house went dark in 2019, Diana moved to abduct Lane since they no longer had oversight. Jules disagreed with this decision, but made full use of the painter once he had arrived. This is when the next, and sadly final, chapter of Lane's story begins. After a hiatus from one abusive and manipulative doctor, he finds himself under the control of another. These ones acted in very much the same way. In some ways, worse. Hartman and the Marmonts drugged him to keep the painter compliant. However, the Lakehouse forced him to work non-stop, unlike his stay with Hartman. While he was pressured to paint, Hartman let it develop organically rather than by force. Only then would he enslave the painter's talents as his own. After leaving the lodge in 2010, Rudolph managed to reclaim his love of the craft. However, after a short while in the Lakehouse, that love turned into disgust, anger, and self-loathing. Nothing is worse than having the enjoyment of something you used to love become corrupted. Those positive emotions replaced with darker ones. This is something that the Marmonts should have kept in mind. They themselves were attempting to investigate how to measure emotion from a piece of art. If they wanted something positive, they would have to ensure the artist is in a similar state of mind. Instead, they pushed and pushed until Lane felt empty, until he had nothing left.
I can't paint anymore. I know you want me to paint, but I can't. I'm empty. It's just taking from me now. When can I leave? You said you'd let me leave.
Rudolf, but you volunteered to come, remember? We are helping you, like Dr. Hartman did. Perhaps you need to see our doctor? I can arrange that.
No, that's... I am feeling better. Much better. I will paint.
This is wonderful to hear, Rudolf. I knew you would come back to your old self.
In these conditions, the only emotion he could muster is anger and frustration. So his paintings bore those feelings. This all concluded when Jules Marmont decided to put a plan in motion to pull out the remainder of his talent. In his own words, he would cut it out of him if he could, to bleed him dry. Doing it with his own hands would be obvious, but by leaving a letter opener in the cell of an emotionally unstable and self-loathing individual, well, accidents happen. With nothing left, Lane took the blade and cut out a crimson red paint from his own veins. His final painting made on his cell wall, a self-portrait. If an artist puts emotion into a piece, we can all imagine what emotion Rudolf Lane used during this final act. Not only the anger for the Marmonts, there was some transference onto Hartman, the other FBC researchers, anyone that used him like an ox to do their labor. It isn't just this one incident, but a series of abuse that rhymed throughout the decades. What makes it worse is that he got out, felt safe again, and was dragged back in. While he died, that lingering will of hatred remained inside that stone. His art came to life as painted monsters, and the tide of the dark place rose up, swallowing the facility and all those that remained inside. The story of Rudolf Lane is one of a gentleman pushed further than anyone can be expected to endure. His passion corrupted by those seeking to abuse his work for their own benefit. In the end, he left a little present for them, something they could not contend with. The ability to fuse one's soul and emotion into a work of art is something that was studied and ultimately ignored by those responsible. That being said, if they refuse to truly look into this, then we will. This will be the next topic for the channel, the meaning of art. See you then. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please drop a like and subscribe to receive updates on future uploads. If you would like to help support the channel, a Patreon has been set up and the link is in the description below. Have a great day and peace be with you all.